This half hour being brought to you by Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket. Imports, domestics, microbrews, the best selection of beer anywhere. Wine coolers, water, soft drinks, lots and lots of snacks. Yes, they roast their peanuts fresh and hot every day. 6 great flavors of slushies, pickle bar, led by the 2 favorites, the barrels and the dills, indeed second to none. All at Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket. Time to bring in one of the best of the business, and proud to say a good friend, and that is the play-by-play voice, the outstanding Matt Depay of Wisconsin. Matt, welcome. Great to have you back on the show.
Good to be on with you, Steve. How you doing, my friend?
Doing great, bud. Doing great. Looking forward to seeing you on Saturday. 3 in a row for this team. What have you seen have been the common threads, Matt, between the 3 games that's allowed them to get this 3-game streak going?
Well, one of the things, Steve, they've done is they've tightened up the running back rotation. WOWY Walker is getting more of a workload now. He's a transfer from Oklahoma, and he's been on a bit of a roll here, averaging better than 6 yards a carry over these last 3 ball games. Darion Dupree, a true freshman out of Chicago, statistically it looks pretty modest, but he's someone with a pretty interesting and exciting skill set. He can catch the ball out of the backfield in addition to being a really good ball carrier. But they've been able to shorten that up. I mean, there were games they're running 5 guys out there, and nobody was getting a ton of work. So the idea was to try to get somebody hot, and they've been able to do that with WOWY Walker. And I think in a very general sense, the offensive line is certainly playing pretty well now. Defensively, in a general sense, they seem to be playing faster. They talked about having more speed, a lot of that via the transfer portal, and maybe just other guys who are gaining experience, but maybe they're just getting a better understanding now, a year and a half in, with the new coaching staff of what they're doing on that side of the ball. Now, a qualifier is, they play teams that are struggling here too, with Purdue, going to Rutgers, and then Northwestern. So they also know they're playing well, but everything ramps up starting Saturday night. The rest of their regular season schedule is a pretty interesting group of games coming up.
Man, what's interesting to me when I watch WOWY Walker play, he seems to get through small areas, like just creases and makes plays. Is that fair?
Yeah, he's a powerful runner too. I mean, he's not long by any stretch. Somebody made the crack during fall camp. It's like you watch him run, and he might need 7 strides to go 5 yards. He is the anti-long strider.
Yeah,
but he runs with force, and he can deliver a blow. He's just fine doing that. They can make you miss a little bit too, but if it's 1-on-1 and there's no place to go, he will dish it out. And I think part of the feeling is that those 3 and 4 yard runs in the first quarter can become longer when you get into the third and the fourth quarter. He's playing like a very hungry guy right now. Senior year, started in junior college, then at Oklahoma, and he already has more carries at Wisconsin now than he had all of last season with the Sooners.
Another element, too, is that's a common thread in this 3-game streak. I don't think they've been behind a single second, have they?
No, they haven't. They've gotten off to fast starts. It took a little bit. I wouldn't call it a fast start against Northwestern, but certainly against Rutgers and against Purdue, they were able to get the early jump. And of these last 3 games, Steve, I think, and I know Rutgers is, it's been a struggle for them here lately, but you know who they are. They're going to run the ball. Kyle Monangai is going to do his thing. Right. One of the better running backs in all of college football. And Wisconsin had been pretty leaky against the run. It's no great secret. But in the guts of that game, Monangai couldn't get going. So the run defense for Wisconsin has improved. Now, again, this week, it's a little different animal with the Penn State offense. But they have been, they've been playing really well. And the difference is, in these last 3 games, they've won convincingly, which we haven't been able to say that about Wisconsin football, no matter the opponent, for a while. So I think it's safe to say there's some cautious optimism but these guys are starting to figure things out now and are ready to keep building and moving forward. But, as I think we've all figured out, this is becoming a little bit like the NFL, and maybe in a lot of ways, but that it's a week-to-week kind of season. You can feel really great about yourself, and then everything turns on a dime the following Saturday.
No question. Tyler Van Dyke began the season as the quarterback. Then he got hurt on that sideline play against Alabama. Braden Locke, for the second straight years, had to step in. What have you seen in his maturity as a player now compared to the player you saw last year?
Yeah, it's a key word, I think, Steve, maturity, because he will, every game here, he might give the opponent a couple of shots for a pick. And if it happens, it doesn't fluster him. He will come back and do his thing. Now, I think the difference this year is that it is his job. Tyler Van Dyke is not going to come back this season, where last year he was keeping the chair warm until Tanner Mordecai was able to come back. But even last year, he led his team on a really impressive comeback win, a fourth quarter rally down in Champaign against Illinois. But he is somebody who they marvel at how smart he is. You would hope all quarterbacks are, but this guy has a real grasp of their offense, can get them into the right play. His arm strength is not the same as Tyler Van Dyke's. Van Dyke has a better fastball, to use the baseball comparison. But Braden can make the deep throws. This team has become a little bit more explosive over the last, maybe not so much in the Northwestern game, but the two prior to that, they were getting some chunk plays that had been lacking. Even in the USC game, especially in the first half of that game, it was showing an ability to get some big hits. It's, as you know, those 15-play, 80-yard drives are great, but expecting that over and over again, that's a big ask. And they've been able to get some more 10, 20, 30, 40-yard type of plays. That's really, I think, with their ability in the passing game, even though it was modest in the Northwestern game, I think opponents are starting to respect Wisconsin's ability to throw it, and that, in turn, can open up some things on the ground.
Well, that's one of the big differences is when Longo came in, Luke wanted to go with the air raid offense. And what has that meant transition-wise for Wisconsin? What has it also meant transition-wise, personnel-wise, to get into this offense?
Yeah, I think my broadcast partner is Mark Tauscher, who was an offensive lineman here at Wisconsin and is in the Green Bay Packers Hall of Fame. Mm-hmm. And I was asking him this question last year, and he said, what they were asking these offensive linemen to do is a lot different than what they had been asked to do previously. So there was an adjustment period there. When you hear the term air raid, too, I think, there are a lot of different versions of it. Right. Here it doesn't mean throwing it 50 times a game. Right. Now, with the late Mike Leach, it probably did, right? But here it's more about balance. Right. Phil Longo stresses that. He's had at North Carolina previous stops. He has had offenses that have been more balanced, and that's what they're trying to achieve here. And they're getting there. Their whole idea, they say, it's attack grass. Get the ball to a playmaker in space and let him go to work. Mm-hmm. And it's taken some time. Will Pauling is certainly establishing himself. Right. A redshirt freshman from Hawaii named Tretch Kekahuna has. But they're getting there, Steve. I'm not saying they're a finished product by any stretch of the imagination, but they're showing some really good signs in recent weeks.
I've got to ask you about Waller on defense, because whenever anybody brings up to me Wisconsin, he's actually the first player I talk about. When you watch him play, safety spot, punt returner, whatever, what are we seeing with him?
You're seeing a guy who just a ball player. Kind of like when I see Tyler Warren, I'm thinking, this guy's a ball player. Yeah. Whatever you want him to do, he'll do it. Right. I mean, Hunter Wohler, in a way, has some similarities defensively. They move him around. You'll see him close to the line of scrimmage at times. He loves it. He just throws his body all over the place. He doesn't have a pick yet this season. He helped create one in the Rutgers game, but where the ball is, there's a pretty good chance you're going to see Hunter Wohler. He is kind of that, people here love him. He's a Wisconsin guy. Jim Leonard raved about him when they were recruiting him because in high school they asked him to do so many different things. A sky-high football IQ and someone who's really turned into a terrific college player and a perfect fit for Wisconsin. What that'll translate to in the NFL, I don't know that. But here, he's been one of those guys that has just meant the world. And not just what he does on the field. I mean, he's not the world's most vocal guy, Steve, but if he has to say something, he will. Last year, this team, Northwestern, came in here and beat the brakes off of Wisconsin. And Wohler and Tanner Mordecai, at the time the quarterback, had very pointed comments where they were calling themselves out. And that's something that, we hadn't really heard from Hunter Wohler before. But you spend 20 seconds with them, and you can understand how much the game means to him and how much it means to him to be playing at the University of Wisconsin.
The two linebackers, Chaney and Thomas, it seems like a lot funnels in their direction. What do they bring to the table that impresses you?
Yeah, a ton of experience in both cases. Jaheim Thomas is a transfer, started his career at Cincinnati and then was at Arkansas last year and was among the leading tacklers in the SEC. And certainly size, a little bit more linked with him than with Jake. But Jake's another guy who's been a Badger throughout his career. He's from Cape Coral, Florida, but he's the guy who he wears the green dot. You'll maybe get a chuckle out of this. I asked him about that last week. I said, well, they're showing great trust in you, your ability, being a leader, being a captain. How has that gone? And he said, well, to be honest, we don't really use it very much. but they get guys lined up, so he's honest as well as a good football player too. But Chaney's one of those guys that they talked about in the off season. I mentioned Wohler as a leader, Chaney the same thing, from the weight room, all of the workouts, spring ball. He's a guy that the newer players one of the guys that the newer players will go to because they both have meant a ton to this team.
All right. The 3 block kicks. This is something where I've looked at over and over again because it's so often a special teams play can do something. What has allowed this team to be so precise in blocking kicks?
Well, that's been more of a lately thing. In the Rutgers game, it was maybe a low kick. Last week, Ben Barton was able to reject a field goal. They're not afraid to use starters on special teams. I don't think that's unique. But Ben Barton is a starting defensive lineman. Ricardo Hallman blocked a field goal in the Rutgers game. I think there might have been a low snap there, but he still made the play. It was a play to be made. Mm-hmm. He played it. And he made the play. He's a starting cornerback for this team. So, I would tell you they put great emphasis on it. I don't think I've ever heard of a coach who says, "Oh, now we don't." But they do. In the course of a week, they'll spend a fair amount of time each day on special teams work. So they're running a little bit of a hot streak in that regard now, and it certainly served them well in the Northwestern game. They got one of the players got his hand on a punt as well. So I think Fickle uses the word confidence a lot, and I would guess that Coach Franklin does the same thing there. Yeah. Once you start to see some results with all that work you put in, you hope you could build on that. A lot of bad things are contagious. They're hoping some of this good stuff that they've had is contagious, and they can build off of that. But their special teams units are on a bit of a heater right now, and we'll see if that can continue.
Look, Wisconsin's had, we hear the word culture all the time. It's one of those things where you see it, you know it, okay? It's like you can say the word, but when you see it, you know it. With Barry Alvarez, they had it. With Brett Bielema, they had it. With Paul Chryst, they had it. I think I'm accurate in saying all that. All right, now Luke Fickell comes in. What have you seen with him and how he's tried to build a Wisconsin culture based on Wisconsin's tradition, but also how he feels about the game?
Yeah, it's really interesting, Steve. And those guys you mentioned before, you talk about different personalities to be sure. Barry and Brett there's a lot of similarities there, but there are definite differences. Paul Chryst is much different than those two guys. Now Luke Fickell comes in, and no matter, we talked about the air raid, but I remember asking Fickell this really early in his time here before they played the first game, and it's still about the line of scrimmage. Right. It's about being a more physical team, which, if those who know about Luke Fickell's background, would come as zero surprise. He was a nose guard at Ohio State.
Yep.
One of his closest friends is Mike Vrabel. Kind of thrives on physicality, right? Probably to this day, working with the Cleveland Browns, and certainly as a head coach in the NFL, he was like that. So there is an intensity with Luke. I think, the messaging itself in some ways is probably different. Well, not probably, it is different from Paul, but I think the core values are very, very similar. They want to be the team that wins the trenches. They want to be the team that can wear you down. So in that regard, it hasn't changed a lot. I think the players now, and those who came with Fickell from Cincinnati to Wisconsin, they know the drill. And, the strength coach came from Cincinnati, right. Brady Collins. So there is an intensity with which they do things that might be a little bit different, but the core values, I think, no matter the play style, the core values are not much different at all from Paul Chryst, Brett, Barry, so on and so forth.
Madison certainly has had a big week, including yesterday, because the presidential campaign came there yesterday. So obviously the town's been hopping over that. Leading into this game, what's the town and what's the vibe been like in town about the game itself?
Yeah, Steve, it's been a while since Wisconsin has won a game on this kind of a stage. So I would tell you that there is some excitement building, but I think around here there's a hesitancy to it as well. Wisconsin, I think so far in this decade, has beaten ranked opponents twice. Yeah. Purdue and Iowa 3 years ago, and Purdue did not finish in the top 25. Iowa did. So people here are waiting for that, if you want to call it, signature moment. They had a couple chances earlier with Alabama, and then we fought with USC. Although it's been a little different story here lately for the Trojans. But you got Penn State this weekend, middle of November. Oregon rolls in here. I mean, top 5 opponents. So there will be an excitement. It's a night game. The weather's going to be pretty good. Maybe a little chill in the air, but certainly pretty good weather for Madison, Wisconsin for late October. It's approaching Halloween weekend. I'll let you use your imagination from there on what you might see and hear on Saturday night.
Yeah, it's already racing. So the new Big Ten. Obviously, you went out to the coast and you did the USC game just like I did, a couple weeks ago. Just what's your thought? It's something we all have to live with, but what's your thought on 1 through 18? I mean, the new Big Ten.
Yeah, I'm trying to get used to it. Selfishly, it was a real kick to go to the LA Coliseum. I'm sure you felt the same way. Just the history of that stadium. Sure. I'd never been there for a game before, so I really wanted to get there extra early and take it in. At the same time, I missed the Pac-12. Being of a certain age, you grew up with the Big Ten looking a certain way, yep, and the postseason looking a certain way, and now it's changed. So I'm trying to embrace it all, but it's a different world. I'm still wrapping my mind, Steve, around the fact that the Rose Bowl is a quarterfinal game now.
I know. It's forever going to be a quarterfinal game.
Yeah, it is. But I guess at the end of it, the game itself is extremely popular. I mean, the NFL is in its own galaxy, but after that, college football is next in line. Yeah. People love the games. Yeah. It's, Sunday through Friday could be a hot mess, but Saturdays are still wildly entertaining. And I think, with a 12-team playoff, you're allowed a hiccup, maybe 2. But I still think the games themselves, when you see the unranked teams beating the ranked, when Vanderbilt beats Alabama and so on and so forth, there's still a certain charm to the college game that you don't get in the NFL, but I'd be lying if I told you I wasn't.
Right.
I think it was Ryan McGee at ESPN a couple of years ago said, I love Saturday football, I love Sunday football, I don't need Saturday football to look like Sunday football.
Right.
But we're kind of heading in that direction. So, you embrace it. I think the games themselves are still fun. It's still fun getting to know these players. But a lot of this, I think we're all trying to get used to. The younger crowd, this is what you're going to know. And you're good with it. You know what you know. And for us, it might be a little bit more of a process getting adjusted to an 18-team conference.
You're the best, man. It's always great talking with you. I can't wait to see you on Saturday, Matt.
Likewise, man. I look forward to seeing you and Jack. Safe travels. We'll see you Saturday.
All right, brother. Thanks.
Take care.
The outstanding Matt Depay, the play-by-play voice of Wisconsin football and basketball. This half hour brought to you by our good friends at Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket. As we continue on News Radio 1070 WKOK. This half hour being brought to you by Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket. Imports, domestics, microbrews, the best selection of beer anywhere. Wine coolers, water, soft drinks, snacks, lots and lots of snacks. They roast their peanuts fresh and hot every day. 6 great flavors of slushies. Pickle bar, led by my 2 personal favorites, the barrels and the dills, indeed second to none. Stock up now for the World Series, for Penn State, Wisconsin, whatever game you have to be watching this weekend. All at Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket. Great to be joined from the Athletic, Audrey Snyder. Audrey, welcome back. Great to have you with us on the show today.
Good to be with you, Steve. Happy Thursday.
Yeah, okay, great to be with you. All right, let's get rolling with what you've seen through 6 games. Let's start with Drew Aller at quarterback. What are the differences that you're seeing in him at quarterback as a second-year starter compared to the guy that you saw a year ago?
Yeah, I mean, the confidence is noticeable, right? I think you look at Drew, the way he's leading the offense, right? He's much more demonstrative. That was apparent at West Virginia, and that's carried through in all the games since then. Like, that leadership part, right? So much of what we were writing about this offseason was, how does Drew Aller become that vocal leader, right? Well, we're seeing it, and he's doing it week in and week out. So I think you got the intangible piece, right? This offense is putting him in a position to succeed. Like, I think we have to highlight that and the job that Andy Kotelnicki has done. But you also have to credit Drew for taking advantage of it and spending the offseason getting his body ready to understand that he was going to have to be more mobile, right? That's been another big theme in this first half of the season is he's been extending plays with his legs, and that's really helped the offense thrive too. So I think it's the creativity, it's Aller's confidence and demeanor, but it's also the fact that he's been able to extend plays. And, oh, yeah, they're willing to push the ball down the field more, Steve, too. That one's important as well.
Yeah, that's been a big plus, the ability to push it downfield. Look, every time you turn around, it feels like they're in a different formation. They may be running the same plays, but they're in a different formation. What does that mean for teams to prepare for Penn State, that they had to get ready for the various formations of where the ball might be going?
It's got to be a headache. I think one of the interesting things that Tom Allen mentioned last week during the Idle Week, he was asked about Tyler Warren, and he said, listen, I am just glad that I no longer have to coach against this guy. That he said when he got to Penn State this winter, Tyler Warren was one of the first guys that Tom Allen found and said, hey, I think you and Theo Johnson were both the 2 best tight ends last year in the conference, and I'm glad I don't have to scheme against you. And that's the challenge, right? They show all these different looks, but I think the important part is, and I've heard it a lot since the Tyler Warren touchdown against USC. People are like, oh, look at this trick play, look at this gimmick. Like, this is also what this offense is, right? Like, it's not gimmicky. Like, this is what the offense is. This is what they practice. These are plays that they complete on a high percentage at practice, which is why they're running them in games. But, yeah, it's got to be an absolute nightmare for defenses, right? I mean, I think you're seeing it from different players, right? You've seen it from Harrison Wallace, from Amari Evans, obviously Tyler Warren. You're seeing Vengo Wane delivering some crazy blocks, right? At some point, I think he's probably going to get the ball this year, Steve. I would imagine, right? That would be crazy if it happens. But, yeah, if you're a defensive coordinator, don't know what you do. And at some point, we always hear like, oh, it's like you're chasing ghosts. I'm sure there are a lot of DCs that probably feel that way when they're prepping for Penn State.
And just so everybody knows, and I pointed this out before, it's not like Tyler Warren did not snap a ball in the game last year. He did. On the 2-point conversion against Michigan, he did.
That's right. Yeah, good catch, Steve. That's right.
I sit in I have a good seat. I can see things. But that's happened before. But let's flip it to Tom Allen for a moment since you brought that up. For 8.5 months, he planned on how he wanted to play. And that included KJ Winston at safety. And then what he wanted to do with Jalen Reed. What does it say about his ability to adjust and the defensive coaching staff's ability to adjust? Because after planning to play one way for 8.5 months, they had to adjust.
It's huge. I mean, I think that is a storyline that maybe gets lost a little bit in this season because everybody looks at it and like, yeah, the defense is still playing really well, and people have been spoiled because they've played so well for so long here. But, yeah, I mean, that's a significant adjustment. Like, you lost one of the best safeties in college football. And because of that, you've had to get younger at the position. And I think, too, another part of that is the communication piece that's gone on with all of this, too. And I'm talking like the headset, sideline communication with Tom Allen going up in the box and Dan Connor being on the sideline, but also losing KJ Winston on the field, right? Like, there's that assignment piece as well. And so Jalen Reed has stepped up and has stepped up in a big way. But, yeah, no doubt about it to me, Steve, is like people have been spoiled by the defense and the defense playing well for the most part, realistically. And I think you kind of look at it, and it's almost easy sometimes to forget that you do not have one of your best players on the field in Winston. And that is like a crazy good compliment because they're really showcasing their depth and talent in that secondary, too.
What have you thought about the adjustment of Abdul Carter to defensive end?
Yeah, I think we're starting to see him really heat up right now. I think the second half of the season is going to be really fun to watch with Carter and just all the different ways. Again, I mean, teams are trying to get rid of the ball quickly. When you've got Denai Dennis Sutton and Abdul Carter, that's what's going to happen. These guys can both still take over a game at any moment, right? We've seen it. I think we're going to continue to see it. And one of the points that Denai brought up this week, talking after practice Wednesday night, was that the level of physicalness, the physicality in practice going against this offensive line, he said that's something that's really helped them throughout the offseason of knowing that, hey, we're going to be really physical out here. We're going to get after it. And I think you look at it, I mean, you've got the best edge rusher duo in the country. And I think now it's about continuing to move Abdul around and find those creative ways to line him up. And let's not underscore the job that Zane Durant's done either. Like, that's been really significant, really impressive, just the quick twitch, explosiveness. I mean, the man is built, Steve. He is a physical specimen. And I think, again, people don't often want to talk about defensive tackles, but this is a guy that, we're going to see playing on Sundays at some point for sure.
Well, he's built in such a way, Audrey, where he has automatic leverage. I mean, he gets underneath players because of how he's built.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I remember when he got here, Steve, like it was one of the most interesting things that winter and spring, I mean, the coaching staff was raving about him, and it's like, oh, okay, like a true freshman defensive tackle, like it's rare, but also that's a lot to ask for a young guy to see the field so early. And he really has been one of the marquee players on this defense that I think the second half of the season we're going to continue to see and hear more about him. But, yeah, he has done a superb job.
Right, so now you mentioned the dynamic duos, talking about Denai Dennis Sutton and Abdul Carter. Back to offense, and it's Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton. Last couple of games have been okay running the ball. But early on, they had a lot of explosive plays out of those two guys. I want to start with Singleton. His ability to become a better pass catcher, what has that meant to opening up the offense?
Yeah, it's meant a ton. I mean, I think you look at it, right? The guy's now on a building in State College, right? The Gatorade banner is hanging down. I don't know if you had a chance to see that, Steve, but it's out there. It's large. But, yeah, I mean, his abilities are insane. I mean, this is someone who, again, you talk about living up to potential as a recruit. And I think it's so important when you think about this season and how so much has been geared up for this year for a long time with Drew Aller, with Abdul Carter, with Singleton and Allen as well, and, among others. But you're seeing it, right? You're seeing these guys thrive in this offense. I still think, we're going to see Singleton bust a big kick return at some point soon too, right? Like if that opportunity is there, I think we're going to see it. But yeah, you've got such like a plethora of options to work with if you're Andy Kotelnicki that, again, I don't know what you do to try and slow some of these guys down. And if you say, okay, yeah, we're going to give Nick Singleton a breather here, well, in comes Katron Allen, and he's going to try to run you over and run through you and just bring a really different style. But that physical style is something that we've seen Nick also incorporate into his game as well, because both of those guys have spent a ton of time in the offseason trying to kind of play off of each other and help one another out.
Yeah, and then the offensive line, you lose a first-round pick, you lose a fourth-round pick, you lose a fifth-round pick. Why does it seem like they're playing better?
Phil Troutline, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the job that he has done to remake, rebuild, reconstruct, however you want to say it, that room is remarkable. And I think you look at it and you say they have depth, they have talent, and hey, Nolan Rucci's going back to Wisconsin this week. He's a guy that I think we've seen in spurts, of course, and that's just part of that depth and that versatility that you have up front. Like I think that is another element to why this offense is working and why it's working so well, is that because you have such a good offensive line and a line that really, Steve, has been good the last few years. And I mean, I know there were so many years early on in James's tenure for multiple reasons why, the line was in shambles and they were trying to rebuild it after the sanctions. And like, when you take that and you think about where it was 5-6 years ago and then even where it is right now, I mean, it is a crazy impressive trajectory. You look at a guy like Cooper Cousins and the fact that they've been able to get him on the field as a true freshman. I think they are well stocked for years to come up front too. Like that's, I think, maybe the scary part. And Phil Troutline is a massive reason for this success.
I alluded to Jalen Reed when talking about KJ Winston. Some guys, it's amazing how some guys maybe nationally go under the radar. What value do you put on Reed in this defense when you watch him play?
A lot. I mean, that West Virginia game, that was like the showcase game, right? To me, it's just interesting the ways in which his skill set can be used. And we're hearing more about him, emerging more as a leader and as one of those vocal guys on the defense and helping the younger guys in the meeting room, like all that other stuff that's super important and valuable. But yeah, this is a guy that is playing his best football right now, right? And that's what you want. I mean, I think and that's not a knock on earlier in his career by any stretch. Like, this is someone who continues to find ways to get better. And you talk about the small margins, right? And how can you get better? Well, for him, it's been this versatile role. And how can you use him and use him in different ways? To me, it has been such a smart move, but also like when he's been needed to bump back over to safety because of, the injuries, it's like, okay, he's going to go and he's going to do it, right? Like there's no moping, there's no whatever. This is a team guy who's going to go out there and do what you need him to do to get the job done. So I think you have a lot of guys like that, I think, on this defense where it's like, hey, you want me to play here? You want me to bounce around? You want me to do X, Y, and Z? They're going to do it. And I think that, really speaks to the culture here and what they've built and why I think this defense keeps succeeding year after year.
Because James is not a guy that when they recruit a linebacker, for example, they're looking for a guy that can play multiple spots, right? Mm-hmm. Kobe King's not that guy, yet they still recruited him anyway. What have you seen in his development?
Yeah, Steve, that's like, I think if you're drawing up a middle linebacker, right, he's going to look like Kobe King, right? And I remember, when he was being recruited and early on in his career here, the guy's got the leadership capability. He's got the middle linebacker demeanor, hey, I'm going to get guys in the right place, and they're going to listen to me because I know my assignment and I know everybody else's assignment. And that's just instrumental in that position and being that leader and one of those leaders on the defense. To me, that's been huge. And, I think when we think back to last year and some of these decisions for guys to return for another season, right? Like you look at the defensive line and those guys, you also look at a guy like Kobe King and you say, yeah, these guys are back for a reason. And that reason is to catapult them into that next season. And they have elevated their game, right? Those guys that have come back for that next year, they've taken that next step. And that's not always a given, right? Whether it's injuries, whatever it might be, that doesn't always happen. But credit to Kobe and for so many of those players that they've really kind of found ways to take that next step, even with a new DC, too.
Wisconsin's won 3 in a row. And in looking back, you really feel like there were 3 games they should have won in a row coming in. What is your thought on Wisconsin now in October as opposed to what you may have thought of Wisconsin in September?
Yeah, I thought they were down and out, like so many after Alabama, right? You lose your quarterback, it is looking really bad. Their defense has been remarkable. They've stepped it up. I think also you look at the offense and you say, okay, with a backup quarterback, what are you going to be able to do? You're right, Steve, though. This was like the soft part of their schedule. These are 3 games that you should win, and they did. They also did so handily, right? So I think that gives them some confidence. And you say, okay, Phil Longo, like you want to spread the ball around, and you're showing that you can do that. But they're going to have to rely on defense and special teams, I think, to try and somehow, some way pull an upset. I don't think they're going to do it. But for me, like that's kind of the recipe for them to attempt to do it because they do have a really good defense that I think is going to be creative. And they've made some significant plays on special teams too. Even like last week at Northwestern, there were some big moments. So yeah, that plus, that atmosphere out there, Steve, Camp Randall and a night game, people tailgating all day. Yep. They're going to be fired up. The atmosphere is going to be great, right? Like it's going to be loud. There's going to be a ton of crowd noise. Like it's going to be fun for college football. But yeah, for me, that's kind of their recipe, right? Like it's going to have to be defense. You're going to have to swing a couple plays on special teams to try and maybe steal a possession that way or something.
Are you indicating that at tailgating there might be a flow of beverages? Is this what you're guessing at here?
As you say this reminds me, Steve, if anyone's listening that's going to the game, I believe something I read in the summer is that they now will serve alcohol in Camp Randall. So you have it outside, you have it inside, night game. Yeah, it is one of the craziest Big Ten atmospheres for sure, one of the most fun. You would know this better than I do because you're at practice much more than we are, but Wednesday night, it felt like they were just blasting Jump Around almost on a loop. I mean, I could hear it in my car in the parking lot. My ears were hurting. It was like, come on. Was that your experience?
Yeah, it's like that. But like Wednesday, for example, like during stretch, they played country music. I looked at somebody.
Okay.
I said, you know what? I said, not number one on my list. I said, but for the moment, I've had my fill of Jump Around. So I said, I'll take it. When the Big Ten was in divisions, you could look at the respective races. How different is it looking at a Big Ten that is 1 through 18? And are some things getting lost in the shuffle because it is 1 through 18?
It is different. I mean, it is still bizarre when you're looking at it, you're going through stuff and you're parsing it. Like I was doing Big Ten power rankings this week, and you're looking at it and you're like, okay, where do we slot in? Well, Oregon's pretty obvious at the top, but what about Washington? Like you're just looking at it, and it is different. And I still want to dig into more of the miles and the travel piece. And are we still overblowing this, or is there really something to it that it's annoying and it's time consuming and all these things? And maybe what best practices have we learned? But it's still funny to me when you're looking at it and you're like, oh, who's the Big Ten's best offensive player? And you're like, oh, yeah, Dylan Gabriel at Oregon. And you're like, wait, this doesn't make sense. Like, it's still taking a lot to wrap my mind around what this conference looks like. But I will say, since it's like fresh in my mind, the USC experience was really cool. I mean, it was really fun. The Coliseum was awesome. I had never been there before. So, I think and I hope fans appreciate the opportunity to see these other venues. I'm sure, Washington fans that make the trip to Penn State for the whiteout next week. Like, that's going to be really cool for them. And it's a lot to wrap your head around, though. It is pretty weird, but, like, these new atmospheres, new experiences have been really neat.
Yeah, the travel part, you can make too much of it. And the only reason to say is, like, I don't think you want, like, I'm talking about the players. I don't think you want them to think about it too much. Just get on the plane, let's go. Because the trip back was 4:18, something like that. No offense, that's about the bus ride from Rutgers.
That's a good point.
I mean, as somebody who lives this for football and basketball, okay, it's like, okay. Audrey, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. I enjoyed it very much.
You got it. Likewise, Steve. Take care.
Audrey Snyder from The Athletic. This half hour brought to you by our good friends at Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket, imports domestics, microbrews, the best selection of beer anywhere, wine coolers, water, soft drinks, snacks. They roast their peanuts fresh and hot every day. 6 great flavors of slushies, pickle bar led by the barrels and the dills, indeed second to none at Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket. Stock up for the World Series and the big weekend now here on News Radio 1070 WKOK.